Welcome to Brooklyn, a borough of New York City that's a little bit on the shady side. It's served by a variety of New York City subway lines that provide service to neighborhoods throughout the borough and lines that go throughout each borough of the city. Out of the 8 total subway lines serving Brooklyn, one stands out to me because it's not only one of the only examples in America of a single-tracked subway line, but also the rather depressing history of a demolished station that used to exist on this specific line. The line I am referring to is called the Franklin Avenue Shuttle, connecting the Franklin Avenue stop on the A and C trains with Prospect Park, served by the V&Q trains. The shuttle currently has 4 stations: Franklin Avenue, Park Place, Botanic Garden, and Prospect Park. But until the mid-90s, there existed a 5th station called Dean Street. To know the basic history of the Dean Street train station, we've got to go all the way back to the late 1870s, a major time in New York City's public transportation development. Today's Franklin Avenue Shuttle had its first steps in 1877 when it was planned as just one of a group of steam railroads that connected downtown Brooklyn, or its outskirts, with the hotels and resorts at Coney Island and Manhattan and Brighton beaches. According to Forgotten New York, most of Brooklyn by this time was rural, with farms and towns connected by roads like the old Flatbush Turnpike, later straightened and renamed Flatbush Avenue, and King's Highway, which followed an old Native American path through the woods. The railway became known as the Brooklyn, Flatbush, and Coney Island Railway, or BFCI, incorporated in 1878. Originally running from Prospect Park to Brighton Beach, they wanted to find ways to get to places more downtown. Since subways weren't a thing yet around this time, they had to improvise by building a trench through the hill at Crown Heights and run the line below grade, connecting with the Long Island Railroad tracks at Atlantic Avenue, with their permission of course. Up until 1899, steam locomotives were the rule in both elevated and surface railroads. In 1899, elevated electric trains began running on the Brighton line in addition to steam service, but all steam was done away by 1903. In those days, surface trains did not take power from today's third rail, but instead used overhead trolley wires. There was simply too great a risk of accidental electrocution if a third rail were to be used on the surface. Even today, unused utility poles that carried the wire can still be seen along the shuttle's length, a remnant of the pre-third rail and grade crossing elimination days. The local property owners were promised a station on the elevated structure near the old Bedford Street terminal, and one was established by 1897 at Dean Street, nearly adjacent to the former terminal, which was closed. Due to the station not being very well patronized, the company that built the station closed it in 1899, but it would reopen in 1901. The station continued to be poorly patronized, as it was only a few hundred feet from the Franklin Avenue station, which was located at the busy intersection of Fulton Street and Franklin Avenue. Nevertheless, Dean Street was upgraded to handle 6-car subway trains with the rest of the Franklin Avenue line in 1924, according to Wikipedia. The station was also reasonably close to the Park Place station, which was the next station going downtown. Dean Street consisted of 2 tracks and 2 wooden platforms with switches on both ends to accommodate more efficient two-way traffic, instead of just 1 track, which is what the Franklin Shuttle is mostly. It would wind up as one of the last stations in the city to utilize wooden platforms, as by the later decades concrete was mostly chosen, as rebuilds happened for a lot of the stations throughout the city. The very last station in New York City to utilize wooden platforms was the Prince's Bay station in Staten Island, being converted to concrete in 1997. So, why did Dean Street close? Well, for a few decades it was seen as a perfectly normal station, but it was very, very, very neglected. Barely anybody who used it paid the fare, and the wooden platforms had holes in them. Because of this, Dean Street only had 133 paying daily riders on a typical weekday as of '85, making it one of the least used stations in the system, and that's not counting the fare evaders. As time progressed, the shuttle's trains kept getting shorter and shorter and shorter. In its prime, it utilized 6-car trains, but that got shortened to 4-car sets of R32s and R40s. By the 90s, the shuttle utilized a singular 2-car set of R68 cars, which is what is still used today. After a few more years of advanced deterioration, the NYCTA finally decided to close Dean Street because of low ridership, decrepit condition, and close proximity to the Franklin Avenue station. The very last day of service was on September 10th, 1995. According to the New York Times, at the time of its closing, Dean Street and Franklin Avenue were the two closest stations on the system, located just 3 blocks apart. It was charged that many people who used Dean Street jumped over the turnstiles, a major problem at the time, lowering the passenger count even further. All that's left of Dean Street is the elevated trestle that trains went over upon entry into the station. Other than that, zilch. Everything was demolished. A fence located at these coordinates blocks off the former staircase entrance to the elevated station, and the platforms were demolished as well. In the mid-90s, the entire shuttle line was rebuilt, including every station except Dean Street, because, well, it was already demolished, never to see service ever again. No replacement station, no flag stop, nada. Done. Today, the line still operates as today's Franklin Avenue Shuttle, utilizing 2-car R68 train sets going up and down the line, connecting the 8th Avenue line with the Brighton line with another connection to the East Parkway line, carrying almost 20,000 riders every day with 10-minute headways. Dean Street is no longer a visible part of this unique shuttle, but it's a pure example of what not to do when you build a subway station. Don't neglect it, because then it's going to start falling apart and people will start taking advantage. If Dean Street was taken care of a lot better, it would have lasted a few more years, but it would still close, because keeping it open when it's just 3 blocks from the Franklin Avenue station just wouldn't make sense. The point is, if you decided to build a subway station, please be sure to maintain it, as it wouldn't like to end up like Dean Street, the train that lost its battle to neglect. Thanks for watching.